Hello to all of you. We're going to get started. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Playful Learning in the Library. I'm Janet Nelson, Director of Library Engagement for Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speakers, and they can start today's presentation. On your screens, you should see a chat box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or you have any type of technical issue, please feel free to type something there, and we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. We'll be taking questions at the end of the session, so if anything comes up that you'd like clarification on or want to respond to, you can type it into the chat box, and we'll be compiling all of your thoughts and questions, and then we can address them at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be sure to get answers and post them with the recorded webcast after the event. There's also specific contact information available for the presenters and myself that you should see on your screen as well. After the session, you can feel free to email us directly if you have specific questions that we may be able to help with. We are also using Twitter today, and the hashtag is #DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see that hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box. It's also up on the main screen right now, and we're monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. Just for fun, while I'm doing introductions, we're going to pop up a poll question on your screen to help us better understand today's audience. So our question today is, what is the current state of your children's area? So you can take a look at the options for the answers there and then let us know. Now on to introductions. As I mentioned, I'm Janet Nelson, the Director of Library Engagement for Demco, and I'm moderating this session. At Demco, we're always interested in better ways to meet the needs of our customers, and these webinars have really been a great way for us to connect and provide additional information on important topics for evolving libraries. We're well aware that engaging children is one of the essential goals of most libraries. In addition, we're finding that learning through play is not only fun, but also more fully engages children in the learning process. I'm pleased to introduce you to our panel of speakers today. We're fortunate to have Allie Pritchell and Ryan Uden from Barrington Public Library. Ryan is currently the head of operations, but was the head of youth services during the renovation of the Barrington Public Library and was very involved in the planning and implementation phases. Since the renovation, Allie has taken over as the head of children's services, and she's very passionate about inspiring lifelong learning in her community. She sees the day-to-day activities that occur in the space and will be sharing what they have learned since opening the space. We're also joined by Sean Kelly, who is a project architect for Ingberg Anderson. He's been practicing for 15 years and has been involved in the design of 30 libraries. Sean has an interest in technology and literacy spaces and was intimately involved in the renovation of the Barrington Library. So before I turn this over to our panel, I just wanted to show you our poll results. So it looks like most of you on the call today are looking to make some small changes in your space. So you should find plenty of ideas for that. And then if you want to plan for other things in the future, you'll have further ideas to kind of start as a foundation of that planning. So Ryan, we're going to put the controls into your hands and you can get started when you're ready.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you to everyone today for joining us for a talk about playful learning in the library. We're all very passionate about it, and so we're excited to talk about what we did and some of the different things that you might consider doing in your space, things that we learned along the way, and also tips for encouraging staff support. So here is a picture of our space. We'll talk a little bit more about the individual elements as we move along. A little bit of housekeeping too. We did create a Pinterest board that people can use to access resources and products that we mentioned today, and so we'll share that at the end of the presentation. So what is play? Play is at the basic, the way that we consider play is something that's unstructured. It's an opportunity for kids to do something, make their own experience out of it. They're taking whatever items that they have and they're imposing their own direction to it. So they decide what to do with the items before them. We don't, as adults or caregivers, we don't put a structure to their play. It's the free play element is the most important thing. Kids themselves will put a structure to it. An example would be my son will often play with cars at home, and he will organize them in whatever way he wants to, and all of the Corvettes and the Mustangs always must have their hoods and doors open. So that's a structure he's put to it versus me telling him to do that. It's also a content-rich experience. So kids have a lot of opportunities to play in a realm that is not where they currently are. So they can take their toys that they're playing with on the floor, and all of a sudden it's a farm, or it's a garage, it's a playground, it's a jungle, any of these different things that they can imagine items portraying a different item, different vocabulary, different experiences. So there's a lot of different content that can happen there too. So why is play important? Kids are born wired to learn. And development is a back and forth process between both the biology of the brain and the experiences that people go through throughout their life. So you kind of, at the basic knowledge, so I hope there's no neurologists that are in this presentation today because I'm really going to put a basic definition out here. But you can think of development, the brain development, as a great big field. And there might be 3 cities on each side. And there are no roads between them. But as people start moving back and forth between the different cities, roads will start to create. And the roads that are used more often are going to become more permanent, more maintained. Roads that are used once or twice will grow over with weeds. So as you're introducing different elements of life to a child, those brain pathways will grow and develop as things are experienced. So you want to give them a wide range of experiences to help that brain development. The other thing that play is important for too is that the developmental foundation is created right there. So play can help with building social skills and emotional skills, and that is a great foundation for the higher level cognitive skills. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but you can kind of think about them as, like a wall being built and the brick and mortar being held together. So you want to build those social emotional skills and capabilities so that you can then start to build on the higher functioning skills too. Play is the classroom of life. So things that happen when kids play that they can practice out the skills they'll need throughout their life. So in terms of, you might be playing with a bunch of blocks, and my friend over here has all the red blocks. I have all the blue blocks, but I really would like one of those red blocks. So how do we start to negotiate and communicate about how we can share the resources that we have between us? Cooperation. We have a great big pile of blocks, and we want to build the tallest tower we can, but I need my friends to help me. How do we communicate with each other to make that happen, that we work together to build this big, tall tower? But then one of the blocks of the tower wasn't perfect, so it collapses. It's a positive failure. We tested something out, it collapsed. Is it a disaster? No, because we can just rebuild it again. We'll have fun. We'll learn more. It's a trial and error as we go. So play is an opportunity for kids to try out things in a risk-free environment, and they learn how to fail and try again. You also build on empathy skills through role-playing, playing with puppets, just pretending, telling stories, through doing folk tales. How did Little Red Riding Hood feel when she opened up the door and Grandma didn't quite look like Grandma anymore? Now, executive function skills is something that I find really interesting right now, because a few years ago when we started talking about play in libraries, it wasn't a term that people were using as often, but I've heard it so often in the last few weeks even, in terms of various stories on NPR and this kind of thing. Executive function skills really are skills that people need to develop to have lifelong achievement, both in school, work, relationships, health. They have to do with the skills to work with information, focus your thinking, filter distractions, and to switch gears. And you develop these skills through opportunities for play, as well as healthy modeling of the behaviors. So, and there's a lot of the social-emotional development there. Self-regulation is a big part of these executive function skills. And the one thing I find very interesting about this too, and you'll see it as we talk about the goals for our youth services project, is that it goes beyond preschool. These skills are ones that continue to develop into the teenage and early adult years. So we wanted, we talk a lot about preschool literacy and the importance of the 0 to 5, and as we just talked about how important that brain development is. But as you go on, kids still need encouragement in learning these skills, and so there's still room for play as you move forward. Here, I have put a graph up here from the Center on the Developing Child from Harvard University, And it is absolutely a great resource, the Center on Developing Child, for all sorts of different brief videos and white papers on all sorts of play and early development and brain development. So when you're looking to find more resources to learn more about this, this is a great place to start. We did include this on the Pinterest page, and I just like to highlight that too. Types of play. There are lots of different types of play. Just to kind of give a little bit of a spectrum of the different kinds of play that we think of too. Active play, the physical, large motor, outdoor sports kind of play. Make-believe, as we're talking about empathy, playing with dolls, role-playing, scenes, acting out stories. Manipulative, construction, puzzles, different patterns, building with blocks. Creative, music, arts and crafts, audiovisual, and the learning, books, games, and skills. So there's a lot of different things that you can think about with play. So we've talked about play, the importance of play, and all of the science behind it. And again, there are more resources on that Pinterest page that you can look for to get into those in a deeper level. But why do we think libraries are centers for play? Well, first and foremost, libraries' mission has always been to create lifelong readers and learners and achievers for kids. And we just wanted to take that mission and expand it beyond strictly the literacy skills to all of child development, because we want to empower these kids to be the best that they can be. And so with that awareness too, we also think about the library's place in the community and evolving formats. There may be, and this will be very specific to your location. I know we have just about 300 people out here today, 300 different communities represented possibly, and this is where you start to think about what your library is in a community and what the needs are. What kind of collection do you have moving to the digital realm? Is that meaning that the people coming to your library are looking for a different kind of experience than traditionally? Maybe you have some different space requirements now if you have more collection on the digital side. Does your community have a lot of opportunities for unstructured play? Where are the playgrounds? What other institutions are there? What kind of unstructured play happens in the schools and the daycares? If their focus is more on structured play, maybe there's a role for your library for the unstructured play. Are your kids in your community very structured in all of their activities? Again, here's an outlet for them to have some unstructured time. And also, depending on home life challenges, there might be kids that have a lot of stresses from neglect or abuse, poverty, things that would really hinder their development if they don't have a chance to have some unstructured play too. So again, communities are different, and what your needs are for a community will change. The picture here is actually my hometown library. And the reason I put it up here too is because, as your poll indicated too, that maybe you're not looking to do something large, a huge renovation like we did. Maybe you're looking for small ways to incorporate play into your space. And we think that there's a lot of things that we've done that can be done on a variety of scales. So we wanted to let you know that we keep that in mind as we go through, that there's a lot of different things that we've done that can be done in a smaller way or in a different way that would meet the needs of your own space. The Barrington Area Library, we are, just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of where we're at, we are in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Our district is a 72 square mile district, so it's a larger space, but a relatively small population, 44,000. And the renovation project that we were involved in lasted from 2013 to 2014. We were under construction for 14 months because it was nearly the entire library, all of the public space was renovated during that time. At a cost of $8.5 million for the total cost, the youth services cost was $1 million. And again, there are a lot of things that I think can be done here at any scale. This renovation did incorporate a lot of different furniture and shelving and that kind of thing. So I want to just let you know that we think there's a lot of opportunities here. We were inspired by a few different things as we started to think about what we wanted the space to be. We knew we didn't want to create just a new version of what we had before, so we started to think about what we wanted for our new youth services space. And as we were working with Ingberg Anderson and the design team, Sean Kelly did suggest that I read a book about Howard Gardner and his multiple intelligence theory. And I did, and it was a really great perspective on all the different kinds of disciplines that you can incorporate and encourage when it comes to learning and play and intelligence. And that really made me start to think about, offering something for the whole child. We also took field trips to other libraries and other institutions such as children's museums to get some other perspectives of what we could do and what we wanted to do. We also took a look at our library and our staff and wanted to build on our strengths. So we had a staff that had a lot of enthusiasm, and they were creative. Here you see they're doing some this is Allie here doing some hands-on We Do programs there. We also really liked doing participatory experiences at the library. We wanted kids to come in and have an experience while they were here. And so a thing that we started several years ago that continues to this day is there's always something hiding in the library. Kids come in, they find it, they get a sticker. It changes every so often what the character is, and it's really a low-key event, but it is a great outcome because there's a lot of interaction with the staff and the kids. So every time they come in and get the sticker, the kids get to talk to them. They look forward to doing it. It's a nice routine, and it's just enjoyable all the way around. We also had a history of doing some kind of creative things in the space. And before we renovated, we had already started doing some things. We wanted to try out a magnet wall to see what we could do with that. And as you can see here, for one of our summer library clubs, we did, I think that's Spud and Corny, that kids could decorate throughout the summer. And we also had a staff member suggest we put in a whisper tube with a PVC pipe. And it was a very low cost, low investment opportunity, and kids loved it. They played with it every day they came in, and that was a very small thing but had a good outcome. And we also have a Duplo table. Now, for me, is looking back on this whole process, we used to have a train table here. And once we made that decision to not have the train table anymore, to transition it to this Duplo table, that was when play really changed in our space, because now we had this item that was very creative, very free play, multi-age, and lots of cooperation that you could see around it. No longer were we constantly repairing a train track or people fighting over, who has the blue engine and I want the track to be here. Now there's a lot of different things kids could do around the space, and we get great positive feedback both from our observations as well as from our customer comments too. We did move the Duplo table into our new space, and you'll see that a little bit later. Staff buy-in. Some of you might be thinking, as you're wanting to put play into your space, how you can convince your staff and or your administrators to go on board with having play in your library. A few things that we did, one of my favorite things, we actually created a Pinterest page and invited staff to pin ideas to it. And it turned out to be a really great thing for us. Sean and the design team from Ingeborg Anderson were also on it, so they could see in a pretty moderated way the different ideas that we're coming with and which ideas were really gaining some momentum. As you can see an example here too, Becky did put a picture of a wooden play space from the West Bloomfield Public Library on the board. And then we started to have a conversation about it. I said I like this part of it, and the other staff members commented too. And it was a really great way for us to all get a wider perspective of what we could do with the space. And also a great way for them to have a voice. And we can even look at that page today and see several things that people put out there. Allie put a pin out there with a really amazing thing that she'll talk about later. And so it's nice to be able to say, you did have a contribution here. We also took trips to not only to other libraries, but to other things like a maker fair. And it was good for me to take staff members with us, because then they can both observe how other people are interacting with the spaces and the activities, and they can experience themselves so they can get a better idea of how it might work. Again, the prototyping worked for both staff and customer buy-in. We did a chalkboard wall just to test it out, to see if we'd want one and how it might work in the renovated space, and that was great for people that might not be so on board with this idea, could see it work in real life and see how there were a lot of possibilities here and how much the kids liked it, and then also could generate some excitement with the customers. My last picture there is actually a glass wall that we went to visit as we were talking about some of the storytime design. And again, I took a staff member with me because it's important for everybody to feel a part of the process. And while they couldn't be a part of the whole process, to give them a voice at times was really helpful. Project goals. So we did all of our field trips and searching, shopping trips, our conversations, and we came down with a list of goals that we wanted for the space. We wanted youth services to be a destination. We wanted to create repeatable experiences. We did not want kids to come in, do this fancy thing once, and then what are they going to do the next time they come in? We wanted to appeal to multiple age groups, so not be a center just for preschoolers, but for preschoolers and the other ages we served up to 8th grade. Encouraging the various disciplines, definitely provide those unstructured opportunities for play, and improve our collection browsing. So while it's not a play-based goal, again, how you're thinking about your space is all-inclusive, so that was right there. And that is a sad picture of before, and we will never look at that again. The hard part. So we have all of our ideas, we have our goals for the project, and now it's time to make decisions. And if you're looking at doing any kind of change, whether it's a big change or a small change, you're adding a service, you're adding something to your space, you also need to think about what you're taking away, because we all have a limit to the amount of time, money, staff, resources. So if you're doing something new, what are you going to stop doing? If I want to start this one kind of story time, we only have so many hours in the calendar and the day, so what other program am I going to stop doing to make sure that we give the appropriate time to these programs? Same thing with our space. Manage your space like your collections. Where are you getting your bangs for the buck? Where are your needs meeting your customers' needs? And think about that way. And then you use those goals that you made to prioritize the choices that you have. So we've talked about play, why play should be in a library, some of the different inspiration to our project, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sean Kelly to talk a little bit about what you might want to think about with planning your space.
So like Ryan was saying, there's a lot of choices that need to be made in any project. And what I'm going to talk a little bit about here is how we approached adding play and kind of an interactive area into a library space. I've been involved in a lot of libraries throughout the years, and we've all incorporated some level of interaction into our children's spaces, the different libraries I've worked on. But this was kind of we're breaking some new ground here in terms of the level of, or the balance that actually need to be maintained between all the different things in a typical youth services department. So I can't stress this enough that you're going to need to make a choice. You have a collection, you have services you want to provide, and now you're going to introduce some new interactive or play-based item. You have, typically almost every library I've been working on lately is a renovation as opposed to a brand new building. They are still doing some new ones, but generally you have a defined space. You need to understand that if you're going to introduce something new, you only have a certain amount of area, and that new item will most likely displace something that's already there. So starting that from the beginning, everything that you add on that list that is new, we can pack some things in, but you have to understand that there's going to be a choice at some point. Which one do you want? And hopefully you come up with a balance of all of them. So that's what this next slide is kind of illustrating is you need to do is assess your space. This is the first floor level of the Barrington Area Library. And what we went through is looking at what they had. How much space do they have? How is it being used? What was the main circulation pattern? Then we took that same space and then we said, well, what could it be? This, the fun time in the project is always the no limits discussion. Cost isn't an issue. You just dream big and just get as much down on the paper as you can and try to figure out what you want to do. There'll be plenty of time to bring things back into reality, but the kind of the first couple meetings really set the grand stage for the project. So much like learning is for a young child, the more you can get out in the beginning, the better the product will most likely be at the end. So Ryan kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but we don't want to necessarily go through and just demo everything. We want to find out what are the things that are working great and make sure we preserve them. We want to find out what's not working but worth trying again and try to figure out how we can fix it. And then we also want to identify what is not going to make it into the next stage or the next realization of this space. One of the big things is we actually took youth services, which was on the second floor of this building, and we moved it downstairs. In this overall plan, it made sense that the first floor be this very big active zone and the upstairs be a more quieter, more reserved zone. So all the active functions made their way to the first floor. The orange box on the screen is where youth services ended up being located. So during the whole process, lots of meetings, lots of interaction, and that I can't stress enough. When moving forward with things that are not familiar, which are generally interactive areas, it's good to start conversation early, and it's good to talk through all of the what-ifs. You're very familiar with collections, your study spaces, quiet zones, meeting rooms. These are all familiar things, but in general, the new activities, they don't have a set kind of rule book that traditional library planning does. They're also foreign to a lot of people, staff as well as patrons. So you want to talk through how this affects the project and really get, you know, that idea phase. I can't stress that enough. And what we ended up doing as we met and we went on all these field trips and we researched and we heard all the different types of comments from the staff is that we should be thinking about the space maybe a little bit differently. So instead of organizing things in more of a traditional manner, we decided to take this and organize them in individual tasks versus group tasks, and then quiet spaces versus active spaces. And that's what set up the relationship between the different spaces overall. So we developed this kind of mind map of how we think things should be laid out in the space and the relationship to one another, which is kind of a very unique way of approaching it based on traditional library design. The other thing we did is we started categorizing and trying to understand all the different interactions that we can have. The light bright is an easy one. The light bright, not a lot of places had it at the time. It has a footprint. It's about, it was about 8 feet long by like 1 foot deep. That's the space it takes up on the floor. But you still need the space in front of it, about a 3-foot zone where you can actually interact with the light bright. And then you need the space behind it because based on the scale of the light bright, you can't actually appreciate what you create with the light bright without being able to step back and see it. In addition to kind of figuring out the floor plate that it would take up, we also went through and tried to figure out what might be the age ranges, what we need anything that additional, like we needed power to this. What were we trying to hit? What types of learning would this activity facilitate? We had a lot of different activities that we wanted to use, and not all of them could make it into the space. So we were trying to figure out which ones gave us the most bang for the buck overall in the project. When we started laying out the space, this is that orange block that I showed earlier, we took a very traditional, it's not a bad way, it's how a lot of the libraries that we've designed are organized, which is by age. Either the youngest are in the back or the youngest are in the front, and it kind of just gradiates throughout the space. Very, very effective and very tried and true method. The red dots were to indicate where we might sprinkle in some of these active zones. When we looked at this and we started talking through how the pros and cons of this, it became apparent that this was not the right way that we wanted to lay out the space. It didn't achieve all of our goals. So then we tried to do a zone approach. This is also kind of a typical way where each kind of age range gets a little area in the building, and you can kind of meander through all these spaces without necessarily crossing. There could be paths made, and we started laying out the activities. But this, again, didn't quite meet all of the goals in the project. So we actually took a step back and tried to figure out, well, what might be the best way to do this? So what we came up with is that there needs to be an area where the activities can be shared by all the different age groups. because we only could have so many activities in the space. We had to try to maximize the area that they would take up. So what we did is we took a little bit of space from each of the different departments and we created this interactive zone. We also then didn't want to abandon the age layout, and what we did is we actually made kind of a nautilus circle. So you start, when you enter the space, you go from the youngest and then you kind of swirl around to the oldest. And that's kind of what it laid out to once we got it on the plan. So you come in, you kind of make your way through a technology zone, through a play zone, early literacy, the juvenile, and then teen, and you wind yourself around this town square, which is where we put the majority of the activities. This is a shared space that no age group gets to own. And this is what it laid out after we started putting all of the different shelving and the activities in. We used finishes such as a flooring material and other cues in the space to kind of highlight that central town square. And then from there, children are able to branch off into the other areas. The town square is also meant to be the more active and loud space. And as you filter up from that to the corners of the space, it's supposed to get a little bit quieter. This also introduced the ability to introduce a few individual or more age-appropriate activities in their zone, but keep the major and the major ones highlighted in the center. I've mentioned noise, and I wanted to kind of bring this up because it is a big piece of the project. When you create active and play spaces, noise comes along with that. And as you can see in all these images, there's a lot of people and there's a lot of activity, so there's going to be noise. This is the byproduct of play. So it's not something to be scared of, it's something to understand and embrace and then figure out methods in which to deal with it. So one of the two ways that we dealt with the noise is we created kind of a portal into the space. This helps contain the noise from the other parts of the library. The other way on the right is we introduced these sound clouds. We left space between them so we can actually use both the bottom and the top side of the cloud in essentially trying to create more surface area to absorb the sound. It's still going to be noisy in there, and that's just the reality of a space like this, but we just wanted to control it the best we could.
And as we talk about noise, and this is Ryan again, as we talk about noise and controlling our expectations going into the project, it was important for us to do that with our staff too, and because that also will feed into how we communicate with our customers. So before we opened up the space, I did sit down with the staff and say, here we have created an active space. We've created a place where we have these blocks, and we've given them wings and costumes and a floor that has a little bit of give to it. It's an exciting space. It's an active space. We were successful in that. So we need to let the kids be kids. We need to let the kids be active. It's their space. And if you want kids to collaborate and communicate, as Sean said, it will have noise. And that's okay. That's what we want. So it was something that we needed to, again, manage our expectations going into, as well as think about how we'll communicate with customers about that. And we do give them options. We understand that this space right here might be a little loud if you're working on a project with an individual child. So we have some tables in the corners. We have some study rooms throughout the building that you're also able to use. So it is still a shared space for everyone, but it was something that we needed to think about beforehand to know that if people were in the space, that they could do the things that we set out for them to do. Now, if you do anything in your space, or if you don't do anything at all, you're likely to get feedback. And so we wanted to touch on that just a little bit because you might have noticed that we have a slide. Again, we do have noise in this area, and that did generate some feedback. And so we thought we would be good to talk a little bit about how to respond to that. So I've got a couple of examples here of things that I pulled off of our Twitter and our Facebook page with various comments about the play area. We get a lot of comments about the slide, not so much I think now, but is in the first few months about who cleaned it and this kind of thing. And Karen McBride is our public information manager, and she's very good at what she does. And so she took a stance to respond to this question in a very casual way. We believe in the benefits of active play. It's not a problem. We clean it just like we clean anything else. I think that's a good model for how to respond to some things like this. but it's also a thing to think about how you will respond. So I have a few tips here too. Tips on how to respond to feedback. Know when to respond. The comment that we got on our Facebook page about the Park District should be building a playlands, it was actually one that Karen chose not to respond to because she could see there were some different motives in that comment and wasn't sure that a conversation was going to be productive. So she chose to respond to other things. She didn't respond to that one. Be consistent about your brand and your voice. You'll notice Karen responded to those things versus Ryan responding to those things. It's important that you keep that consistent and that language consistent. Pairing to that, we did create a page on our website called Why We Play, and it lists out all of the different interactives and the reasoning behind them, what they're teaching, what the kids are learning as they're using them. I did put that on our Pinterest page, but it was something that we created right away for both our staff and our customers because we knew that staff in every part of the building would get comments about the youth services area. And so I wanted the customer service people to be able to respond just as well as the people in youth services with that same supportive information. And it's important to share the positive stories because we generate a lot of them, both in pictures shared with us and the pictures that are taken throughout, which Allie will talk about a little bit later, as well as various articles and blog posts that people write throughout the community about the space too. So share the positive and just be consistent with your brand. What we learned right away. So it was very exciting when we opened up, and it took a day or two, I think, for word to get out through the community. We heard right away that one of the local nannies had put information on their nanny Facebook group about the space, and that was great. We instantly had a lot of activity in the space. One thing that we definitely learned right away, Sean was talking about that town square and the benefits of the town square. Not only did it meet the needs that Sean outlined too, but as the staff working in the space, we found it was a great thing for caregivers could keep an eye on multiple children, multiple ages in an easy way. From our service point right there in the town square, we have a great sight line to both the collection and the spaces. So that worked out really well. We were also very pleasantly we also were very happy about the fact that people enjoyed all of the elements the same. Technology elements, people loved our iPads, are always busy, but the things that aren't, the things that are the unplugged elements are just as popular. Allie will talk about them a little bit more, but that was a really great thing for us and very encouraging of the whole plan. The other thing that we learned right away was that the way that we worked with customers was changing. We were still doing our traditional reference, but we were also having some other interactions that were great. They were oftentimes talking to the kids about the activities they were doing. They would come to us and say, come take a picture of this that I just made. Hey, did you see I made your library brand out of, or your library logo out of the blue blocks, and a lot of different things. And we also learned that kids will take the interactives and make something of their own with them. So that's the picture I have here of our pretend marketplace, complete with bugs taken from the magnetic chalkboard wall. So somebody mixed the two elements together and showed that we had an infestation in our vegetable marketplace. So we thought that was great, as well as we've seen kids take the imagination playground blocks, create a castle out of it, add puppets and costumes from other elements, and make something totally new, which was basically the goal of our space to begin with. So that was fantastic.
We took a bunch of the activities that we did, not all of them, and we wanted to give you kind of a summary page of some of the different items that they represent. So what you'll see on the left is the interactive that we introduced. Then we have 3 columns. One is for cost, which is pretty straightforward. One is for staff effort. Now this is staff having to program, staff having to clean, staff having to monitor, trying to take a lot of different things the staff has to do and organize them into a person graphic. One person means it was not really that staff intensive. 4 people means very staff intensive. The last column is kind of generated recently, which is over the last year, how well have the interactives been received by the public? What is the most popular? What is using a lot of time, or this children's time, taking up their time? So I'll just do a few. The Playhouse basically was a reasonable amount of money. It took $3 signs. The staff effort is not necessarily completely off the charts. It takes a little bit of programming, takes a little bit of monitoring, a little bit of cleaning, but the children really do like it. So this one did kind of meet a lot of our goals. We look at things like the whiteboard. It's very inexpensive to do, takes a little bit of staff time, and we do get a lot of use out of it. Oh, there we go. The next couple, I wanted to highlight the Imagination Playground. This is a very expensive item and takes quite a bit of staff time in monitoring it and cleaning it, but the payoff has been amazing. It's one of the most popular things in the library. Compare that with the Real Play, which really wasn't a very large investment. Does take a ton of staff time to monitor, clean, and set up some programs for, but also that one has been really well received. So what we found out is that we have a pretty good balance of the different interactors. They can't all be the superstars, but there doesn't seem to be any that are really not meeting expectations.
Great. And I'm Allie Perkle. Again, I'm the current head of the department, have been since October 2014. I started 10 months after we first opened the space. I was a staff member in the department during the renovation, so I have that perspective as well. And I'm going to give you some examples from our space and also the changes that we've made since opening. To build on what Sean was describing, I want to talk a little bit more about our two most popular activities as observed by our staff. They're the Pretend Marketplace and the Imagination Playground, and we base that off of the number of kids and adults who are playing with the activities. They're almost always in use. The excitement that kids express about them and specific requests that they make to play with these spaces, and the high level of interaction between children and caregivers in these areas. Our Pretend Marketplace, as Sean said, didn't cost a lot of money. It does involve some effort, including cleaning and planning new themes for the space, but it delivers a lot of bang for the buck. Through this activity, children engage in pretend play, and with pretend play, they explore their curiosity about the world through role playing. For example, if they've seen mom or dad make a salad like this, now they have a chance to try it in the Pretend Marketplace at the library. And we've tried to extend that pretend play as far as we can by adding real things like working scales and cash registers. We have some color sorting baskets, which you can see in that picture, and toys that have a counting element to them. That adds a layer of more traditional learning that kids can choose to participate in or not. Another remarkable thing about this area is the amount of interaction that happens right here. Children can work independently, but eventually they want to cook for somebody or sell them something, and that's when you hear from around the corner, ice cream, get your ice cream. And through this interaction, children develop social, emotional skills, and they learn about themselves and others. There's also a lot of interaction between kids and caregivers in this area. We noticed that adults have an easy time playing with this activity, possibly because of the realness of it. It's also a very versatile space. Our 3 booths there are kind of like a blank slate that allow us to change the theme by changing the items in the shop, which offers our customers a new experience when they come. So we've had a sandwich shop, an ice cream shop, a bakery, and we plan to put in a flower shop sometime in the future. It's also a very scalable activity. It can be achieved with less space and resources than we have. Both the Pretend Marketplace and the Imagination Playground are areas that naturally highlight the learning and development that kids can gain from playing, and we see evidence of creativity and learning every day. Our staff are encouraged to capture in a picture or take note of the moments when they saw learning taking place and to share that with the rest of the staff and with customers. For example, we see our activities being used to make connections with stories like when bananas get left with a pile of Curious George books. And we see examples of experimentation without consequences, like when an inventive chef makes a cookie pie. Who wouldn't want that? Our Imagination Playground is arguably the most popular activity in our space. As Sean mentioned, the cost is higher, as is the effort for staff, but the results have been worth the investment. A little background info, Imagination Playground is a playground made of loose parts, durable foam blocks that kids can use to make anything. They offer 3 block sets. We started with the basic and have since added angles and curves to our sets. Some great things about this activity is that it's very collaborative. There's tons of interaction that happens in the imagination playground. Kids who haven't met before are building things together as this group in the middle that made a castle. A whole lot of social emotional learning happens around this activity, and they don't always get along or share, and that's part of learning too. And a surprise result has been that it's been a tool to help kids understand what a library is. Sometimes the staff and the parents explain at the library the blocks are for everyone to use, just like the books are in the library. It also engages kids in full body play necessary for children's development. The blocks are big, but they're light, and kids can lift, stack, crawl, and roll them. It's also very open-ended. It can become anything they want, including a castle, pirate ship, or a complex machine with gears that turn to move a ball. And because they're also open-ended, they're also age-independent. So young children love to crawl inside of them as much as older kids like to create complex designs. And finally, they have wow factor. The first thing you see when you walk in our space, it's large and exciting, and both parents and kids really take notice of this area. So why are these two so popular? We've identified that they have these qualities in common. They're both immersive experiences, they're child-directed, and they let kids create their own narrative. We have realized that some elements in our space are not as interactive and they tend to be overlooked. We see this as an opportunity for improvement. This particular area where we have our animals on the wall, I think that's something that I pinned to the Pinterest page when I was on the staff. We've got elephants, giraffes, a dolphin, a parrot, and generally these are used as landmarks and create a fun atmosphere, but they're not given very much attention. So we ask ourselves, does it encourage curiosity and participation? Maybe the animal shapes by themselves are not enough to do it. So one way we've identified that we could increase the level of engagement that visitors have would be to add a growth chart next to one of the animals so that the children and parents might come and compare their own height with the animals, and parents can compare their child's height over time as they visit the library. Maintaining activities requires time and resources, and I'd like to try and give you some insight into the sustainability of certain activities and how you can think about the long-term cost. We intended to create repeatable experiences, but not static spaces. Through planning and rotating our activities, we alter that experience enough to make visits exciting for our regular customers and to inspire a different style of play and learning. One of our librarians took on the role of play coordinator, which is essentially like an exhibit coordinator. She develops new learning experiences around our existing activities, such as the pretend marketplace, the chalkboard wall, and our costumes. She also monitors the condition of toys and props in our public space. But incorporating new experiences requires budgeting for interactive elements and replacement costs. And now that we've been in our space for over a year, we've developed a rotation schedule for the themes that we have selected. So we're reusing things that we originally purchased for that space too. Maintaining the costumes and activities is just like maintaining the library's other collections. You read and replace. Items are replaced when they're worn beyond casual use or broken, which happens because they get heavy use. And for this reason, it's important to select items that are durable and high quality. And we've included some of those brands that we've liked on our Pinterest board that you can see at the end of the presentation. In addition to these considerations, there's regular cleaning, which Ryan is going to talk about.
Yes, one of my roles as head of operations is now I oversee the facilities team, so I've got some interesting perspectives on this topic. So we do have a schedule for cleaning of the spaces, and we work together with Allie on that. And generally, each of the interactives is cleaned on a weekly basis and throughout the month, so we kind of hit everything throughout the month. Costumes are cleaned weekly, so as Allie said, just make sure you have a back supply so you can rotate things in and out. We were fortunate enough that Sean was able to shoehorn in a washer and dryer for the entire building to use for building purposes, not personal use, different for the washer and dryer, so those costumes can be cleaned in-house. However, before that was installed, since the youth services area opened before the entire renovation was done, we did actually just coordinate with the local cleaners, and they actually did drop off and pick up, so that worked out really well there too. The Imagination Playground, as indicated by both Allie and Sean, it is something that requires a little bit more staff upkeep. But the nice thing about it is, while we do spend some time cleaning it each month or each week, depending on the needs, they clean up really well. And so they continue to look good, and that's important to us. So it is an attractive, interactive for people. And you might be concerned overall about cleaning and how that might work in your space. A couple of things that I would suggest. One, I put on the Pinterest page, the CDC has guidelines that it's actually a link that's talking about containing flu, but it goes into good description about the difference between cleaning and disinfecting. And while we keep the area clean, we're very responsive to issues, immediate issues that need to be addressed that the youth services staff will make us aware of. But we also know that everything is clean, only as clean as that one moment. So, we could have somebody cleaning things all day long, and then there's still like that next person that comes and touches it. It's not going to be a sterile environment. So there is that. And I think as you think about that, you think about what's appropriate in your community. What are the expectations in your community? Talk to your local schools and your local daycares and what they do to keep their space clean too. And as Allie said, plan for where. The next thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is safety, and because often it is a question that we're asked, and there is the component of the slide and safety. It actually comes back to a couple of things. It's an active space. Kids will be kids. There will be in any space, even before the renovation, you had kids that would bump their head or whatnot, and a lot of the staff interaction is twofold, both in doing some monitoring of the space, but we do rely heavily on the adults to monitor the children that they're with. We are fortunate that we have good adult participation when kids visit the space. Due to, I think, our location, we don't have a lot of walk-in traffic. It's mostly driving-in traffic. And we have a couple of rules. You don't go up the slide, and you don't use the blue blocks as a bat. So we have those things that we suggest as people are playing. As well as the unattended children policy. So we do have a policy that if you're 8 or under, you do need to have an adult age 16 or older with you in the space, and that's generally not a problem. If we have a grown-up that happens to wander off to a different area, then we just have a conversation with them, and I think they understand the importance of it too.
Okay, well, we already discussed some things we learned when we opened, and as time goes on, we continue to learn about the effect that changing our play space has had on our staffing needs and customer expectations. Staffing has changed due to an increased number of customers in our space at any one time. We're now staffing our desk with 2 staff members. We used to have predictably slow times, but that's not the case anymore. We've also added regular roving shifts for staff working in the office to come out and assist. Our interactions with customers have changed. Customers are staying in the library for longer periods of time. This presents us with more opportunities to help our customers or even just get to know them better. We're seeing new faces in the library, and we have a chance to tell them about our programs and services. And as Ryan mentioned before, we have interactions, kind of untraditional interactions with kids where we ask them about what they're making and actually engage with them in play. Our space also became the catalyst for changing our programs to include more play. People vote with their feet, and when we opened, they were voting more for Pretend Marketplace than for our program room. That's since changed, and this summer our programs were often full with a waiting list. But we paid attention to what our community, and how they responded to the changes we made. They were thrilled with the activities we offered, and we looked at what they liked about those activities and how we could bring customers back into our classes and events by incorporating that. A classic program, the drop-in craft, was...
Go ahead, I'll fix it.
Thank you. The drop-in craft was tweaked until it aligned more closely with the type of activities customers can find in our space. We saw we needed to make drop-in activities accessible to younger audiences, but still broad enough to be enjoyable for older kids, and process-oriented crafts and art projects were the way to answer to that. So the focus there is on the experience of making art with different mediums rather than having a recognizable product. And we try and include sensory elements for younger kids and customers with special needs, such as frozen paint and Play-Doh. The product is not important, but that doesn't mean that kids don't have pride in what they make. It's also open-ended, like a lot of our activities. Another one we tried out and has gone very well for us is our family fort building. Participants worked in family teams or small groups and were given materials to build a fort. Afterwards, they got cozy and watched a short feature film. The focus here is on engagement between child and caregivers and creating a positive shared experience, also very open-ended, and they can engage in problem solving. So what's next for us? In addition to our new programs, we're looking at continuing to look at ways to improve the experience that customers have. We're playing around with pop-up programs in the public space since crowds don't always correlate with days that we have prepared programs. These drop-in style mini programs that are ready to go are a good solution for that. We tried it with our World Read Aloud Day, where you see a picture here where staff picked out a favorite picture book and had impromptu story time. We were able to reach a lot of customers who might not have normally attended one of our regularly scheduled story times. Another thing we're considering is ways to engage caregivers. These are some signs from the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, and we think they could work well, and that type of thing could work well in our space as well. So how do we measure our success? Here's some things that we know. We know that the foot traffic in the library increased 28% from last year. We have seen increased engagement through staff observation, and we've observed more interactions between children and caregivers in our space. And we've had many positive comments shared with our staff on a regular basis. The positive comments certainly outweigh the criticisms. Youth services collection usage has increased. 36% of the library circulation, youth services accounts for 36% of the library circulation, up from 34% last year. Things that we'd like to learn, what percentage are actually visiting the youth services department of people who are visiting the library? Anecdotally, we know our foot traffic has significantly increased. How do we measure engagement? That's a question that we have, and we're looking at ways to answer that. And also, how do we know if we've communicated the value of learning through play to our community? Do adult visitors recognize the learning taking place? Those are questions that we have, and we're seeking to answer through possibly surveys or other methods. And though it's not easy to quantify, we think it's pretty significant that they tell us how they feel without any provocation at all. So here's what we've talked about today. We talked about the developmental benefits of play and how it encourages learning, things to consider when planning your play space, and we've shared some lessons we've learned since opening day. We hope you've heard something useful or inspiring that you can bring back to your library or early childhood space, and now we hope you go and play.
And Janet, we'll turn it over to you now to see if you have any. I hope we have some time for some questions here. I know we ran a little bit long, but if you've gotten any questions from the field there.
We do have some questions, Ryan, and I think we'll do one quick one, and then what we'll do is we'll just make sure that all the other ones get answered and they go into that Q&A log that we'll have available afterwards, so everyone will be able to see what questions were asked and what additional information we're going to provide on those. In addition, if you still have questions, please still feel free to send those in or send them in when you do your survey. So the one that we're going to ask at this point was, the viewers noticed that there was a teen space indicated in your drawing, and they'd always heard that that was something that should be put someplace else. Could you just address that?
Well, it's interesting that is a really good question, and it's interesting that that's asked because here at Barrington Area Library we have a couple of different spaces. We have a young adult space for our high school students, and then within the youth services we do have a space for grades 6 to 8, and I think and we call that the teen space, and so in those plans that is what that was considering, the grades 6 to 8 teen spaces. And we did, and we can talk more about kind of what areas we kind of designated for activities and study booths, as well as a media lab for them. But here, that's a distinction that we make with those spaces. Allie, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Perfect. I mean, having been in your space, I had a feeling that that was the way you plan that, but I just wanted to make sure we could share it with everyone. So since we are running tight on time here, I just wanted to go ahead and wrap things up. We'd really like to thank our panel for sharing their ideas and insights on what can be done to promote playful learning in the library. Hopefully you were able to take away a few new things to try. There are some great questions, as we mentioned, and we'll get those answered and get that out to everyone. You will be receiving a survey at the end of this webinar to let us know how we did. So please take a few moments to fill that out. We really love your feedback so that we can make these sessions even better in the future. Feel free to comment on other topics that you'd like to hear more on or speakers that you'd like to hear from so we can consider those in building our program for next year. We've been receiving some really great feedback in our previous webinars that has helped us focus on topics that you are most interested in. A recording of this webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspiration website by tomorrow. Or if you can't remember that, the site can also be accessed through demco.com. So if you missed something or just wanted to review it, you can go back and refresh yourself on the presentation or share it with your colleagues. Next week, you'll get an email that will include resources such as the slides and that Q&A log that I mentioned. So that'll document and answer the questions that came up. Again, thanks for joining us. Please consider joining us on September 23rd at 2 p.m. for Dr. Henry Mackey's going to be presenting from Posit Science, Understanding Brain Health as a Pathway to Relevant Adult Programming. And then on October 7th, we'll go back to the young kids again and have Amanda Struckmeyer from Middleton Public Library presenting library experiences that engage young readers. So keep watching the new Ideas and Inspiration site for other new webinars, and you can also find many that are available on demand to watch at your convenience. So we hope that you will consider joining us for future events, and again, so glad you joined us and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.